George Washington Plunkett was the original head of Tammany Hall and believed in the philosophy of honest graft. He remained the head of the Tammany Hall until Boss Tweed took his place. Boss Tweed was a large political boss and the head of Tammany Hall in New York. He also believed in the philosophy of honest graft. Tammany Hall was a major political machine in New York. It was run by Boss Tweed, who was a large political boss. Honest graft is the philosophy of justified bribery or cheating. Thomas Nast was a major political cartoonist. He drew many satirical cartoons, created the idea of Uncle Sam, and also invented the elephant and the donkey for the two political parties. He nearly brought down Boss Tweed. The appearance of the streetcar made living within the heart of the city unnecessary. People began moving to the edges of the cities and commuting to work by streetcar. This led to the growth of many suburbs. Tenements were urban apartment buildings that served as housing for poor factory workers. They were often poorly constructed and overcrowded. An example of this can be shown in Jacob Riis's How the Other Half Lives. Jane Addams was a social reformer who worked to improve the lives of the working class. In 1889, she founded the Hull House in Chicago, Illinois, the first private social welfare agency in the United States. It was to assist the poor, combat juvenile delinquency, and help immigrants learn to speak English. John A. Roebling pioneered the development of suspension bridges and designed the Brooklyn Bridge in New York, but he died before its construction was completed. Louis Sullivan was known as the father of the skyscraper because he designed the first steel skeleton skyscraper. He was a mentor of Frank Lloyd Wright. Frank Lloyd Wright was considered America's greatest architect. He pioneered the concept that a building should blend into and harmonize with its surroundings, rather than following classical designs. The Ashcan School is nicknamed the Eight. It was a group of American naturalist painters that was formed in 1907. Most of whom had formerly been newspaper illustrators. They believed in portraying scenes from everyday life in starkly realistic detail. Their 1908 display was the first art show in the United States of America. The Armory Show in 1908 was the first art show in the U.S. It was organized by the Ashcan School. Most Americans were first exposed to art by European Impressionist and Post-Impressionist art in this show, and it caused a modernist revolution in American art. Anthony Comstock was a social reformer who worked against obscenity. For example, the Comstock laws were used to set community standards. Dwight L. Moody was an evangelist who preached the social gospel during the 1800s. Mary Baker Eddy founded the Church of Christian Scientists and set forth the basic doctrine of Christian Science. The Chautauqua movement was one of the first adult education programs. It started in 1874 as a summer training program for Sunday school teachers. It developed into a traveling lecture series, an adult summer school, which traversed the country, providing religious and secular education through lectures and classes. Johns Hopkins University was one of the first private universities that emphasized pure research. Its entrance requirements were usually strict. Applicants needed to have already earned a college degree elsewhere in order to enroll in Johns Hopkins University. Charles W. Eliot was the president of Harvard University and started the policy of offering elective classes in addition to the required classes. Josiah Willard Gibbs was America's greatest theoretical scientist. He studied thermodynamics and physical chemistry. Edward Bellamy wrote Looking Backwards, 2000 to 1887, as a utopian novel which predicted the U.S. would become a socialist state in which the government would own and oversee the means of production, and would unite all people under moral law. Henry George said that poverty was the inevitable side effect of progress in his novel Progress and Poverty. The Gilded Age was a name for the late 1800s. It was coined by Mark Twain to describe the tremendous increase in wealth caused by the industrial age and the ostentatious lifestyles it allowed the very rich. The great industrial success of the U.S. and the fabulous lifestyles of the wealthy hid the many social problems of the time, which included a high poverty rate, a high crime rate, and corruption in the government. Nouveau riche was French for new rich. It referred to people who had become rich through business rather than through having been born into a rich family. The nouveau riche made up much of the American upper class in the late 1800s. William James developed the philosophy of pragmatism. He was one of the founders of modern psychology and the first to attempt to apply psychology as a science rather than a philosophy. Pragmatism is a philosophy which focuses only on the outcomes and effects of processes and situations. Edwin Lawrence Godkin, the editor of The Nation, was a political writer who founded The Nation magazine, which called for reform in America. William Dean Howes was the editor of The Atlantic Monthly and a champion of the realist movement in fiction writing. Henry James was an American writer who lived in England. He wrote numerous novels around the theme of conflict between American innocence and European sophistication/corruption, with an emphasis on the psychological motivations of the characters. He was famous for his novel Washington Square and his short story The Turn of the Screw. Stephen Crane was a writer who introduced grim realism to the American novel. His major work, The Red Badge of Courage, is a psychological study of a Civil War soldier. Crane had never been near a war when he wrote it, but later he was a reporter in the Spanish-American War. Hamlin Garland was best known for his work Middleboard, an autobiographical story of the frustrations of life. He was one of the first authors to write accurately and sympathetically about Native Americans. Bret Harte wrote humorous short stories about the American West. He popularized the use of regional dialects as a literary device. Mark Twain was a master of satire. He was a regionalist writer who gave his stories local color through dialects and detailed descriptions. His works include The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, The Amazing Jumping Frog of Calaveras County, and many stories about the American West. James McNeill Whistler was a member of the realist movement, although his works were often moody and eccentric. He was best known for his arrangement in Black and Gray, No. 1, which is also known as Whistler's Mother. Winslow Homer was also a realist painter known for his many seascapes of New England.